Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of the Celtic Way. I am your host, John McGinley. I'm joined by Ryan McGinley. We're here to chat through everything coming out of last night's draw against Crvena Zvezda and the Europa League, kicking off the Europa League phase with the draw away from home, which I think is pretty valuable, but I think there's positive and negatives coming out of the night, so we're going to discuss a few of those in each direction. Before I bring Ryan in, I do have to say a message from our sponsors. It's Simply Furniture, who are located in Hillington, Glasgow. They're an independent brand dedicated to bringing luxury and contemporary style into your homes across the UK. With a decade of experience in furniture retail, they meticulously source the finest pieces, which are curated for quality, comfort and timeless design. And if you want to check out their showroom, you can make a visit in Glasgow, and if you mention the Celtic Way, you get a special in-store discount. The links will be below in the description as well, so do check that out. Ryan, how are you feeling? I know you did the reaction last night, but how are you feeling, like, having slept on it and a day after? How are you feeling this morning?
A little bit better than I was last night. Thanks very much for having me on again.
Were
Yeah,
you a wee
I'm
bit
better
moany
than I
last night,
was.
Ryan? Is that accurate to
Yeah,
say? Were you?
yeah. Maybe I don't know that I was making this point to Tony on the show last night. I was completely invested from minute 1 to 90. After coming into the game a little bit lethargic and almost if it's the Europa League, it isn't as good as the Champions League. But I was totally invested for the 90 minutes, and I really wanted Celtic to get a victory. I know they were only ahead for 10 minutes, but they had chances. They had really good chances to extend their lead, and it's a really scrappy goal that they concede. The game kind of just went out after that, despite a couple of chances here or there. Yeah, I was after watching Crvena Zvezda, after doing the expert insight with Vladimir Novakovic. The weaknesses were there on show, and I think that if Celtic were in a little bit of a better place, more prepared, maybe if they brought in their players a little bit earlier and they were more ready they were better prepared for what Crvena Zvezda had, then I think they could have quite easily got 3 points from that game. But I'm a lot more positive today. It's a difficult place to go. Crvena Zvezda have won 7 games out of 7, as Brendan Rodgers said last night. They've scored a lot of goals. Celtic kept them to only 1 goal in the game as well. So yeah, I'm a little bit more positive than what I was last night. But still, I've still got that lingering feeling that Celtic could have got 3 points last night.
I think that's undoubtedly true. I mean, I was just, I think I must have been in a different headspace from you last night. I mean, I don't know. Like, I know after the game, there's always these frustrations of what if, what could have happened here and all that. But I took the viewpoint, like, a point away from home against Belgrade, I think is positive way to kick off the campaign. I actually had a bit of worry that Celtic were going to lose last night. I think my most optimistic take was that it was going to be a score draw, and ultimately that's what transpired. And so I wasn't feeling too hard done by the end of the game. But I do take your point. I do think the game was there to be won. I think there was a few frustrations on the night for me. I think it started with Maeda for me. Now, I'm not singling him out because I just don't think he was suited to be played through the middle last night, and that decision is on Brendan Rodgers. But if we're talking about one of the negatives last night, I think undoubtedly playing Maeda in that centre forward position that was just never going to come off. Now, the frustration with Maeda for me primarily, and this sounds petty, but I think it also just underlined how disconnected from the game he was. He was just caught out offside like 5 or 6 times, it felt like, and that was consistently frustrating for me, and he wasn't able to link up with his teammates. And I was crying out for that change that Brendan Rodgers made at half time. Now, that's a good example of turning a negative into a positive, because I was delighted that Brendan Rodgers made that change, and then seeing Iheanacho's impact in the match was, as I thought, fantastic, and a real kind of force to build around for Celtic. I just think his touch is really good, and he knows how to play that centre forward position. Not just his goal, Ryan, but even out with his goal, I just thought he really added something to Celtic's game in general last night. And listen, that's another positive for me, and Iheanacho turning around the initial perception of his signing, which I had and very publicly said. But I'm delighted that he's already turning that around and already looking like a pretty good acquisition for Celtic.
Yeah, there was a lot of negativity when Kelechi Iheanacho joined the club, but looking at social media last night, it's taken a 180, which is absolutely brilliant to see. People are raving over what he's done so far in the Celtic team. That's 3 games that he's played, and in all 3 games he's got a goal contribution. Scored the penalty at Rugby Park, he then got the assist at Thurhill for Sebastian Tenetke, and he scored the opener in Belgrade against Crvena Zvezda. So for a guy that came in after the transfer window had shut, there were question marks over his fitness, about his mental attitude about how he was going to fit into this Celtic team, especially with the way that he was brought to the club. He's proven a lot of doubters wrong, and I'm quite happy because I was the same when Ian Atchell signed. It was kind of like a, maybe eye roll is too strong a term or a phrase but you know, a Premier League striker that's maybe seen his best days. Is this really what Celtic need? Probably was, because he's experienced and he can lead the line. I mean, you talk about his first touch. That first touch for the goal makes the goal because he gives himself space. It's a great assist from Benjamin Negron, but that first touch is the difference maker. It gives him that little bit of space, and then it's a great finish as well from the striker. He's a focal point up front. He's not the tallest, but he's somebody that Celtic's midfielders and wingers can hit, and he knows how to play that role. He's done it for Leicester, he's done it for Man City, did it for Sevilla as well for a little bit. So yeah, delighted with his contributions so far, and hopefully can keep on proving the doubters wrong, because we'll be quite happy if that's the case.
Just on Maeda, I mean, I noticed a few reporters last night digging for questions on where Maeda's head is at, just with regard to wanting away from Celtic this summer. And look, I get that's a natural talking point coming out of a match like that where he's hooked at half time, but I just thought he was the wrong tactical fit for Celtic last night. It felt like Rodgers was trying to fit him into the team, knowing that you really had to play Sebastian Tinekti, just given his impact on the left wing of sorts. But then where do you fit in Maeda? I think a lot of people may be expecting Maeda on the right hand side last night, but I think Rodgers thinking there was probably Ian Atchell wasn't going to play the entire 90 minutes of a game of that intensity, and so there's considerations there. And so it's less about me. I don't think the story coming out last night, for me anyway, I know a lot of people will think differently, is like Maeda's chucked it and Maeda's head's gone. That's just not what it is for me. I just felt he was the wrong fit last night for the game that Celtic were trying to play. And it's as simple as that, really. And if he's not got the timing of his runs right, which he undoubtedly did not last night, and listen, I'm not really defending Maeda here because I just thought he was pretty poor last night. And again, those offsides just indicative of not having that timing in his game and just not being at the level required for that match on the night. But I just think that, you know, these matches away from home in Europe, I doubt Maeda is going to be that answer as a centre forward. That's just my frank assessment of it. And I don't think it's anything to do with the fact that he wants away from Celtic or did over the summer, etc. I just think it's a reality of what his game is.
He was fully concentrated on the game, because even in the early stages, a couple of times he nearly caught the goalkeeper out with his pressing. So I don't think it's his attitude that can be called into question. I completely agree with you. I think he just wasn't at the races last night on the pitch, and there's not really much else that you can say. And like you, I'm delighted that Brendan Rodgers noticed that and figured that out, along with the support that were watching the game, and made that change. Because if he'd persevered with Maeda until 55, 60 minutes, then Celtic might have not got that opener, because Kelechi Iheanacho wasn't on the pitch. So that sub paid off almost instantly. He scored in the 55th minute, Kelechi Iheanacho, but even before then he was making chances, and Celtic automatically looked more dangerous when he was leading the line when compared to Maeda. I hope that he can get back on form. Maeda, it's been a bit of a difficult start for him, coupled with the fact that there's been, not rumours, there's been actual active talks that he would want to leave the club. But I just hope that he can get himself back on form on the pitch. I've got no doubt about his commitment whatsoever. I just want him to get back in good form, because then it'll provide another option for Celtic, both through the middle and out wide. But I think, like you said, for these European games, I think you need somebody that's a little bit more experienced and who is more careful on the ball. And Kelechi Iheanacho was that last night. He brought a calm to the forward line for Celtic, and he came up with a goal.
I'm smiling there because there's a lot of comments about Rio Tate in the live chat, and I see them, and that is on my list as one of the negatives of last night.
It was on Tony's list last night as well.
I'm going to come on to that. It's undoubtedly a talking point for me. Thanks to everyone in the live chat for joining us live. I know I do enjoy the people coming on for us regularly. I will bring in some of your comments as the discussion develops. I'm going to bring in another positive before we get into Rio Tate in the Celtic midfield, which is a massive issue for me at the moment. We've been talking about it for days and almost weeks at this point. Celtic midfield is a problem. But just on Colby Donovan, for me, last night was the perfect example of why Colby Donovan is now ahead of Anthony Ralston in the Celtic pecking order for me. You know, and maybe not for Rodgers, maybe not for others, but I think we've seen what the Anthony Ralston experience is. There's positives and negatives to it, and he has limitations, I think, as a player. I think he gives us all for Celtic. I think he's been a good backup choice for a number of years, or a decent backup choice at least. And I think when you consider Anthony Ralston, there's a lot of judgments made of him, but if you consider him just as a backup player, I think he's been fine. So I just want to say that for starters. But I think when you have a player coming through like Colby Donovan, who's shown this hunger and desire and ability to play for Celtic in a really tough environment from the off, I think it speaks really well to his potential. And I think this is what we're talking about when we're talking about Celtic bringing through youth players. If a player does come and kind of sees his chance and sees his moment, then you have to build on it. You can't block Colby Donovan's development for the sake of Anthony Ralston. And that's just my thoughts on it. And it's nothing against Ralston. It's just like, this is what's ahead for Celtic now. And I think we can all see that Donovan has a bit about him. Brendan Rodgers last night, very complimentary of Colby Donovan. He was asked if he just kind of exemplified what Celtic were doing. There was a resoluteness at points to Celtic's performance last night. Brendan Rodgers said of Colby Donovan, he was absolutely brilliant. He's just turned 19. He's not played so much for the first team, but everything in his game, he defends, he's really strong, he's aggressive, he stops crosses, he competes in the air, but then he can play. And Brendan Rodgers makes the point, not only can he play, but he also has the belief to play. He takes the ball, he passes the ball, he's made some really good passes, so he's so pleased for him because he's a young guy who's come to the academy. He was waiting for that opportunity and has taken it once it's presented itself to him. So I'm delighted for Colby Donovan, Ryan. I know others are. Surely now he now builds towards being Alistair Johnston's backup, and look, it's very early days, but I think Celtic now need to invest playing time into Colby Donovan.
Yeah, now it's the most important step that he's made that breakthrough into the first team. Now it's all about keeping those minutes. I know it'll be difficult when Alistair Johnston comes back and he is undoubtedly the first choice right back, and with good reason. Canada international, loads of games for Celtic already. But Colby Donovan has shown that he's good enough to play on this stage. He did not look out of place last night in Belgrade. In fact, he thrived on that atmosphere, and you could see that in moments. It's not just his defending, which was good, and that's the main thing in his play. His first job is to defend, but he was also coming out with the ball and looking really confident in doing so. And in doing so, he took a lot of pressure off of the back line as well, because he was happy to dribble on the ball and pass it to his midfielders. That bodes well for the future. And I've said it 3 or 4 times already on these briefings since he's made his way into the team, and it's been one hell of a month for him because he's had a lot of game time. When you think of what could have happened, he could have went to Dundee and he would have been getting a lot of game time in the Scottish Premiership. But I think he'd much rather be at Celtic and doing his thing for his boyhood team. You could see it on the smile on his face last night in some of the interviews that he was conducting. But just this last month has been incredible for him, from being 3rd, 4th choice right back to being frustrated due to injuries and thriving on that occasion. It really does. It sets an example of why you probably should give these youth players a chance if they're good enough, because they can thrive in the atmosphere. And even though he said he was nervous before the game and travelling to the game, he didn't look nervous on the pitch because he had a job to do, and that's what he said in his post-match, and he did his job really, really well. For me, he was player of the match last night just because I thought he was so composed, given all the circumstances, his age, the atmosphere, the gravity of the game. Yeah, I was really impressed by what he brought to the team, and only 19 years old, so still plenty of time to grow and improve in his game.
Yeah, and I guess it's like he's not particularly massively eye-catching, and I guess you don't really want your right back to be. I think he's just effective, and he just gets on with his job. And I think he plays as if he's more mature. That he's just turned 19. He's not been, he's not an established 19-year-old. He only turned 19 earlier this month, so he is very raw and very young. But I just think there's good signs there, and hopefully, just with the way Brendan Rodgers is talking about him and what we've seen so far, I do hope that this is a moment where Celtic now think, right, okay, we've not really done a great job of bringing in these academy talents and really, establishing them in the senior squad. But I think with Colby Donovan, they have a chance to do so, and then hopefully that can be an indication. And listen, 6 months ago, did anyone really know too much about Colby Donovan? I think we knew he was kind of, he was around the fringes. People had heard his name. I would say the vast majority hadn't seen him play a game. He's obviously done well over pre-season, so these guys can come through quite quickly, and hopefully it's an indication that there is some kind of talent within Celtic at the moment that we can maybe see. Even if there's another youth coming through this season, then that would be two establishing themselves in the senior squad over the course of a season. I think that would go a long way to Celtic proving that there is, green shoots of hope in terms of the academy and players coming through. So, yeah, it's just important to highlight is that as well, because I think he deserves the conversation to be around him at the moment. It's less about building hype around him, because I do think there's just, as I say, there's such a long way to go. It's more just recognising that Celtic have a player here that they can build on. So let's go into it, because Celtic's midfield's busted at the moment, and it is a Ray Hatate issue, but it's also a Callum McGregor issue to an extent. It's a Nygren issue, though. I'm going to take Nygren out of what we're talking about here, because I thought his moment for the goal was very good, and I think his massive error apart from that was not burying the chance he had, because I thought he had a really good opportunity coming into the box and arriving onto the ball, and I think he should have finished that chance. But Celtic's midfield is just not functioning the way it needs to right now. Whether it's Ray Hatate, Callum McGregor you're looking at, Brendan Rodgers needs to change it. I think that's just clear now, and it's a little bit frustrating in that he's not shown any signs of changing it. But in his defence, Ryan, I will say this: when Arne Engels came into the game, again, I'm just not seeing enough from Engels. And there was a moment in the stoppage time where Engels had the chance to play in an attacker. It gets intercepted, the ball goes up, and then the ball comes back into the midfield area, and Arne Engels is there in a 50-50, a potential 50-50, and he comes out of the challenge. He doesn't keep his foot in to win the ball, and that's so frustrating for me. As a fan watching a game, you need your midfielder to be more engaged in the game, that especially coming off the bench in the late stages of a match. But Arne Engels isn't the big problem. Ray Hatate was very poor last night again, and I'm worried about Ray Hatate at the moment. I just don't think he's anywhere near the level Celtic need. Even in domestically right now, Ray Hatate's just not it. He needs to find his form very quickly, or this midfield's not going to turn itself around. Him and McGregor just seem to be caught in this kind of codependency of sideways passing. I'm not quite sure what it is. It is incredibly frustrating to watch. There was moments last night in the first half, Ryan, where Ray Hatate seemed to have the space of the park in front of him to burst into, to run forward, progress the ball into, and he takes it forward 10 yards, he turns to Callum McGregor and he passes it. And that's just not doing any good for the team. And I know the argument is, Brendan Rodgers said before, you have to try and find different angles of attack, etc. But surely, in a match of this important, when you're trying to seize the initiative and there's so much space ahead of you and there's attackers, Tenekte and Maeda at that point, surely you have to show some attacking impetus in the team when that is Ray Hatate's job in that Celtic midfield. And it might not even be the individuals. Is this what Brendan Rodgers is telling them to do? He claimed it's not in a press conference a few weeks ago. There's something wrong with the midfield setup, whether it's personnel or the way Brendan Rodgers has set it up. Something's badly wrong there for me.
Completely agree, but it's not anything new, because I've been speaking about this for weeks, and I feel like there's a lack of balance in Celtic's midfield at the moment. Their three midfielders are very similar, both in stature, in terms of their weight, and the way that they play the game, and in some of the risk taking as well. So I was making this point to Tony last night. Both Benjamin Nygren and Ray Hatate, I'm totally taking Nygren out of it because it's a great assist, but he was guilty of it in the first half of giving the ball away. How many unforced errors did those two players make in the first half in terms of giving the ball away in silly areas and really inviting pressure on both the midfield and the defence? Yeah, completely agree with Hatate's forms all over the place at the moment, and when Hatate's good, he's really good, but my problem with Hatate is when he's not so good, it's obvious that he's having a bad game, and it really does bring the team down. He's noticeably bad, and it hurts the team in the midfield because of the misplaced passes, because of the lack of physicality that he's got. He's not a good tackler of the ball. So what are you getting from Ray Hatate when he's not playing well? It's not a lot, and the stuff that he is giving you isn't good. I think there needs to be a change in the midfield, and I completely agree with you on Arne Engels. He's not shown enough when he's coming off the bench. It's not his fault that he's an £11 million player, but you expect more from a player that you brought in for a lot of money last season. These are players that you should be able to rely on in the second half to make something happen for you if it's not happening for the players that came off the park. Unfortunately, at the moment, Engels is playing within himself. It's just an area where it doesn't seem, apart from Benjamin Nygren getting goal contributions by way of assists and goals, and he should have scored that goal last night, that big chance that he had. apart from that, the midfield just isn't functioning. So whether that's Bernardo coming in to things, Engels playing as a number 6, maybe pushing McGregor further forward, although we've said that and Brendan Rodgers just does not want to play that for whatever reason, there needs to be a change in the midfield, or when they get to January, and I know it's only September, I know the transfer window's already has been shut and it will be shut for the next couple of months. I think what is now really high on Celtic's priority list is an anchor in midfield, somebody that will bring that balance, that physicality. But I've been saying that for a couple of years and it's not happened.
I mean, my concern, Ryan, is everyone's calling, bring Powell and Bernardo into the team, bring Engels. Some people are calling for Engels to start more often as well. And I'm just like, I don't even know if that's going to be the answer. I don't think Bernardo's this magic force that is going to turn around the Celtic midfield. And in fact, the fact that he's not, it gives me worry about what Brendan Rodgers has seen from Bernardo on a day-to-day basis. And the Celtic midfield is the big issue at the moment for me, just in terms of it's not setting Celtic up for the best version of Celtic that we've seen in Europe and at home and away. And actually, I'm thinking about Braga next week, and what do you want from your midfield in that? You want your midfield to be dominant in that game, and I just have no faith that it's going to be, or it's going to be dominant in a way that is far too passive. And yes, they might have the vast majority of possession, but what are they trying to do with that? Are they trying to find, it's the Celtic midfield at its best over the last 5 or so years? It's everyone knows what it looks like. It's those little triangles. It's McGregor bursting forward, being in and Hatate being in a great position between defensive lines. He can turn and find a teammate, but there's just none of that. I don't know whether it's the opposition teams have figured Celtic out, or Celtic have just don't have those connections in the team anymore. Whether Hatate is still trying to find whatever he's going to get with Tunekte. I think the Greg Taylor coming out of the team has actually made a big impact, because Greg Taylor was effectively a spare midfielder at points for Celtic, and I do think that's having a knock-on effect there. It seems to me that Hatate and McGregor are just stuck in a very defensive-minded mode at the moment, and I think McGregor's fairly solid, but in terms of Celtic being an attacking force, I think we need a lot more from all of them, and Nygren. I thought Nygren. I think there's a perception of Nygren that he doesn't work hard or something. I'm not sure where that's coming from, because it's not the case. I think he's very in tune with the game, and he's trying all the time. And as you say, he does have those bits of quality. And I think when Nygren settles properly at Celtic and fully gets up to speed with his teammates around him, I think he's going to be a cracking player for Celtic. I actually think Nygren is the least of Celtic's concerns at the moment. There's been quite a lot of complaining about him over the last couple of weeks, but he's well down the list for me in terms of things we should be worried about.
Yeah, I've got no worries about Benjamin Nygren whatsoever. If this is what he's like, getting assists, getting goals, when he's not playing at the top of the form, then when on top of his form, then what is he going to be like when he's fully fit and firing? Well, he is already fully fit, but you know what I mean, fully firing in a good Celtic team that is completely settled. Look at the 3 goals, 4 assists in his time at Celtic so far. He's automatically making an impact in the midfield. I agree with you, he's the least of Celtic's issues. Also, you've got to take into account that he has been playing out of position in some games. He had to play at right wing for a couple of months, which may have created a perception of him that that's not his best area, so you might have not been seeing the best of him. He's clearly a midfielder, and he made something happen, and that's the one positive that I can bring. Well, there was a couple of positives from his performance last night, but one of the biggest ones out with his goal is that he didn't allow his head to drop, because he was giving the ball away in the first half, but he kept going, and that I completely agree with you on the fact that he works hard. He's such a hard worker. You can see him running off the ball. He was still running. He lasted another 90 minutes. It's not often. I don't even think he's really been subbed in any of the games that he's played. He tends to finish most games that he starts, which is great to see. It shows that his fitness is certainly there. I think once he's fully integrated into this side, then he'll be absolutely brilliant for Celtic. But the fact that he's already contributing goals and assists already, and not allowing his head to drop in pressure-filled moments, is really good to see. I think it bodes really well for the future, and he's a player that's certainly going to help the club rather than hinder them.
Yeah, and listen, I know this isn't necessarily indicative of the player's quality, but just to sum up, I think Nygren covered more distance than any other player in the Europa League last night. So, he is putting in the effort there. The midfield conundrum goes on for me, and I guess we'll see again at the weekend what Brendan Brendan Rodgers knows. I think Brendan Rodgers at times looks frustrated when you can see him frustrated when Rio Hatate does give away the ball. So surely he sees what other people are seeing. You know, we've got to be getting more out of this midfield, and players can't be picked on reputation at this point. I don't think Celtic are in a luxurious enough position to warrant that, because Celtic are still trying to find their form as well, and you need players who are given what Celtic need in that midfield. And for me right now, Rio Hatate isn't. Just maybe another positive from last night. Now you could say Celtic conceded the goal far too easily, etc., and that's true. There's no getting away from that. I think for me, the reaction to conceding the goal wasn't terrible, and we've seen Celtic collapse in moments like that in the past, and I feel like maybe one positive coming out of the night is that Celtic did hold firm and actually could have gone on to potentially win the game as well in the latter stages. So that's a positive for me, and I think just getting a point in general was good. I think if Celtic collapsed last night, lose 2-1 even, I think the mood's much different today, and so I think they deserve credit for getting the point, getting through the game unscathed. Realistically, just defensively, I thought Liam Scales was really good in that first half in particular. I think Scales is really solid defensively, and I think he's actually underrated at Celtic, I have to say. I know there's frustrations with him in distribution and possession, but listen, with the midfield set up the way it is, it's totally designed to. Or the byproduct of its design is that Scales is on the ball for the vast majority of the time, and he's not a ball playing centre half. I would suggest, he's robust defensively, and I think he does his job in those tasks very well at times. So I think there was, although Celtic conceded the goal, I still think there was some sort of defensive resilience there from Celtic last night as well. I think there's two sides to that story.
Completely agree. I thought it was a really good performance from Scales last night, and if you ask him to just defend his box, he will defend. He'll put his body on the line every single time. And to be fair, both centre-backs did that last night, because Carter Vickers picked up a knock. A minute later, I think it was a minute or two later, Red Star equalised. I think he was still sort of feeling the effects of that injury, and he wasn't fully in sync with the game, or that knock that he picked up, it wasn't a full injury, because he continued on for the rest of the game. But in terms of Liam Scales, I thought he put his body on the line. He did what was required of him. Yes, his passing wasn't perfect, but he's got a lot of the ball, and there's a lot of pressure on him to get that ball out from the back, especially when Red Star were looking to press and attack and try and make things happen for themselves. I thought it was a really good performance from Scales. He can frustrate at times with his passing, as we've spoke about, but like I said, if you ask him to defend, then he will defend and put in 100% every single time. I thought in the first half, Scales was outstanding, and then I thought Cameron Carter-Vickers maybe shaded him in the second half. There was a couple of moments in particular where there was a moment where Carter-Vickers just flung his body at a chance, or flung his body at I don't even know if it was a 50-50, but he got right in there to make sure that the Crvena Zvezda player didn't get ahead of him, and that was really great to see, and it showed that they were all together. And like you said, I'm delighted that they didn't concede that second goal, and that they didn't concede a goal in a cluster form like they have done in previous games in Europe. I think that Tony and I speak about this at length. Once Celtic concede a goal in Europe, there's always the worry that they can concede a second in quick succession. And despite Red Star having a couple of chances in the game, Celtic stayed resolute, and they didn't allow them to score any more goals at home. And for a team that's been scoring goals at will this season, as I mentioned, 30 goals, 5 conceded. They've got players all over the park that can hurt Celtic. I thought they did quite well to keep them quiet after that first goal, and that's got to be, and the defence in that regard has got to be praised for doing that, and for not allowing Red Star to get any more goals in the game.
Plunge McNugget saying, we still need a defensive midfielder, we lack height and physicality. Listen, I get that, but for me it's about mobility at that point, because you bring in a player of that profile, do they have the mobility to get around the pitch? And listen, if you're signing a defensive midfielder who has height, physicality and mobility and the ability to play the ball, that costs about £20 million these days. So there's a give and take here. I know, I get the idea. I certainly need to find a gem here in the defensive midfield area. I do get that point, but a defensive midfielder who ticks all the boxes is quite hard at the moment. I would suggest anyway. And I don't. Again, I'm not making an excuse for the club or Brendan Rodgers, but it costs quite a lot of money. And I think we paid arguably overpaid for Arnie Engels, but look what we paid for Arnie Engels, and he's not even in the team at the moment. This is there's difficulties here, and I guess Brendan Rodgers' strength, it probably isn't developing midfielders to an extent. I think that's fair. I think his best work in his career has been developing more attack-minded talent in the wingers especially. I feel like wingers who can convert their games into more of a goal-scoring winger as well. Pete McGee saying 3 talking points from last night. Donovan deserves his place. Yeah, we ticked that off. Starting to make Ian Atchell come on, changed the whole game for us. Yeah. Totally agree with that as well. Their keeper had a lot more crucial saves to make than Kasper. I do agree with that. Now, Kasper Schmeichel, I think there was a few people talking about him. I don't think they were particularly happy with the way Celtic conceded the goal and Kasper Schmeichel's role in that. He did have a majestic fingertip save to keep the scores at 0-0 in the first half as well. Some of his distribution wasn't fantastic, but there was a moment where he just didn't have runners ahead of him. He didn't have the people ahead of him. And he shouldn't be making risky passes in those moments, but that's another reality of this kind of disconnection, I feel like, between the midfield and defence at times. And yeah, their goalkeeper, Matthias, did have a lot of saves to make, Ryan. And Ian Atchell maybe could have got another one on the night.
Yeah, that's a disappointing one for me. I think he goes at it wrong. I think it's a great reaction save, even though the goalkeeper doesn't really know too much about it because it smacks him in the face. I think are we talking about the one after the one he scored or the one before? Because there was 2 big chances.
Well, the one before I think was offside anyway. Just looking at the replays, I think Nigrin, it was maybe offside. So I'm not counting that one too much. I'm talking about the one where he tries to lift it over the keeper. It hits the keeper in the face. I mean, it's not a total sitter, but it's one that you would hope that he could score.
I know I wanted him personally. Watching the replay after it, I was like, I just want him to smash that and hope that something happens. I just, agricultural, yes, completely, but I wanted him to smash at that and hope for the best rather than think over, because you always do run the risk that it's going to hit the goalkeeper if you don't get the required height, because he's so close to the goalkeeper. The goalkeeper can make himself big. Yes, he takes one in the face, and he was lying back after it. He was feeling the effects of it, but I think he could have gone at that a better way. I think it's a big chance for a player like Ian Atchell, and one that he probably should have done better with, especially after scoring the opener and feeling pretty good about himself. I would have backed him to find the back of the net for a second time there. But it's one of those disappointing moments, and after that point there wasn't really any, as far as I can remember, any big clear-cut chances after that one, which was quite disappointing. There was a chance right at the end too, where a ball was played through and it nearly got to Michel-Ange Balikwisha.
Yeah, I think that's the Arnie Engels one I was talking about.
Yeah,
that's the one I'm talking about. Where Arnie Engels, he actually has a lot of time there. He tries to thread it through, it gets intercepted. But yeah, that was another. It wasn't a guilty shooting chance, but it was a chance to maybe try and test their goalkeeper one more time.
It was a good chance. Just the pass wasn't right, and it was a good interception by the Red Star defender. What a moment that could have been for Michel-Ange Balikwisha, who I thought was actually quite bright when he came on and tried to make things happen.
Brown Warrior saying Hatate, Nigri and Scales all poor with the distribution, but the offsides for a player of Maeda's pace at this level is unforgivable. Give the defender a yard and bend your run. These are basics. And listen, I agree with that. I was quite annoyed with Maeda last night. I love Maeda. He's one of my favourite players in recent years. But offsides are just criminal for a centre forward, I think. When the runs, there was a couple of offsides where he's trying to run back onside. Yeah. So it's not as if he's making a run and his shoulder's offside and it's a fantastic ball through and it's just those margins, a small margin of error. It was just like he wasn't quite in sync with the game, and I think that was probably in the end why he was hooked at half time. Brendan Rodgers said Maeda was nowhere near his levels, and that can happen. And listen, we saw Maeda, I think in certain matches, in certain type of game, he can stick away chances. He scored a barrel load of goals last season. A fair amount of them were as a centre forward. I think if Celtic are playing a team that they do have a connection there where they're able to spot Maeda's runs and use his pace in behind, and as you say, there was a moment where he pressured Matthias and it looked like something might come off there. He does have a unique threat, we know this, but it just didn't. It just wasn't apparent last night. And listen, that's what Brendan Rodgers has paid for, to make that decision at half time. And I don't think we need to read too much more into that. I am seeing a lot of stuff. As I said, Brendan Rodgers was questioned about it is this a result of, you're not changing your mind on Maeda's professionalism in that? I'm not buying that narrative at all. But he's a winger out of position, and I guess another negative coming out of last night is just, if you take Maeda into account, you take Tenekte into account, you take Balikwisha into account, there's 3 players competing for one position there, Ryan, and a lack of options on the other side. Yang, not good last night. I think Forrest was fairly effective when he came on. I think he was trying to find space, and he did look a little bit chicken, and I think maybe, Red Star didn't really know how to deal with Forrest at times, which was the positive, but Forrest isn't your starting right winger at Celtic. I think that's just become very obvious by this point, And I'm worried about that now, that you've got this overload on the left and there's a real lack of options on the right.
Yeah, and the fact is, and despite him scoring in the last game, but in the past 2 matches, Yang Hyun-jun started, who was more than 1 foot out of the door on deadline day. He was going to Birmingham. If it wasn't for timing, he probably would have been a player at St Andrews right now. So there's a lack of balance. The left side is so stacked when it comes to Tenetke, Balikwisha still coming through. You get Daizen Maeda that can play there. Jota when he returns as well, although he's a long-term injured. But on that right-hand side, who have you got? You've got Yang and you've got Forrest. And you sold Nicholas Kuhn in July. It's just a lack of preparation on that side, and it's an area that I'm hoping it very early on in January is sorted, because the lack of balance on the sides. I remember seeing Hamish's squad depth picture. I'm sure we did one as well on the squad depth. You saw the amount of players that were on the left-hand side, and there was so many to choose from. And then the right-hand side is half of that. It just, there's no balance. There needs to be balance on both sides. And unfortunately, the players that play on the left for Celtic aren't very versatile, I would say. So they need to play on the left to get their best game. Yes, they can play on the right out of necessity, but they don't get their best game there. Balikwisha looks better on the left. Tenetke has only played on the left, which says more about him. So that lack of versatility in the left wingers and the lack of options in the right causes a bit of an imbalance in the team, which needs to be sorted. I don't want Celtic to be relying on James Forrest every game, because he's 34, he can be a good impact sub, he can still make a difference for Celtic. Yang and Forrest on the right, it's weaker than it was last season when you had Nicholas Kuhn, who was one of Celtic's best players, particularly in the first half. You knew he was gone in the middle of July, and yet there was no player brought in to replace him in that position.
And I'm not really saying, I don't think Daizen Maeda is particularly the answer at right wing, but if I'm looking at all 3 players, I think what the attributes of Daizen Maeda are, I think they're probably better suited than Balikwisha and Tenekte. I mean, Tenekte's all about cutting inside, and I think that would be lost to an extent if he was put on the right hand side. I think Brendan Rodgers was unequivocal with his comments at the weekend just regarding Balikwisha, and that he's not a right winger, and I don't think we're going to see much of Balikwisha at right wing going forward. And so then you look at Maeda. What are Maeda's strengths? It's about, a lot of it's about his physical attributes, about his ability to sustain sprints again and again, and that's not necessarily unique to the left wing position. So I would have my doubts about Daizen Maeda's impact on that right hand side. I do think he's best on the left, but of all the 3 players that we're talking about here, Maeda's probably the best suited to be put out there. What I don't want to see, I've not got much faith in an investment in Yang going forward, and that some people might think that's unfair. I know he does have his fans at times, but listen, there's a reason this guy was halfway to Birmingham City on deadline day. It's both because he didn't really fancy being at Celtic and that he hadn't made a big enough impact to convince anyone at Celtic that he should be a consistent starter at the club. So I don't think that's just going to turn around now because we want it to. I think we have to be realistic about that. Yang might hit fire, and this might be egg on my face, but I just think there's no expectation of that for me, and so there's little point in kind of continuing to invest in the Yang if it's an experiment or what it is at this point, because he's not doing it for me either, unfortunately.
No, would completely agree. I agree with all the points that you made, especially about the one about the fact that he was well on his way to Birmingham. That tells you about where the player wanted to be. It also tells you that Celtic weren't, too disheartened that he was leaving the club as well. So to get to that point to then him starting the last 2 games, and listen, he made an impact at Firhill, and he was winning fouls last night, but he's not the answer at right wing for Celtic. I don't think he's really going to be a starting right winger for Celtic, and that's totally fine. He can make an impact off the bench, but unfortunately, due to a lack of options, they're either going to have to play James Forrest, play Yang, who's not really a starter for Celtic, or play somebody out of position, and that's just a failure to prepare for what Celtic need on a battle on four fronts this season. The fact that they don't have the option, that main option at right wing, and they're going to have to accommodate different players in different positions is a problem, and that comes down to the forward planning or lack of at the club.
I agree with that, and like this is a long way off. I'm not going to go too in depth on this at the moment, but even when Jota returns, like that's another player on that left hand side who's best on the left hand side, which is what we're talking about. Also, just looking at the African Cup of Nations and thinking Iheanacho, Tinekte, and Balikwisha head off for international GE, that's a problem as well. I'm not going to get into that at the moment. I'm just making the early point on that. So there is issues there.
Especially with Iheanacho playing well, because he could find his way back into the senior squad, because I know that he's not been playing a lot of football for Nigeria as of late, but if he's scoring goals for Celtic and they're looking for an experienced striker in AFCON, then they're going to rely on Iheanacho for that competition, I would presume. So in some ways his positives just now could end up being a negative in December and January time, but we're still quite far away from that.
We're probably getting ahead of ourselves there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lippy saying, Lippy33, good to see you. Tinekte was getting marked double, triple pressed. They knew he was the main threat, hence why there was plenty of space right in the first half. And yeah, I guess that's probably our point as well, to an extent, is that, you know, if you do have a player of Tinekte's ability who has been a game changer for Celtic in the last two matches, and opposition teams recognise that, they're going to do that. But then if you have the quality on the right-hand side to exploit that space, then it just changes the whole dimension of Celtic's attack going forward. So I think that's my frustration with the lack of right winger at the moment. And I think, you know, players should be able to exploit that space that they're given, and obviously Yang wasn't able to do that last night. I feel like I go on at Yang all the time. I actually feel sorry for Yang, because I think he shouldn't be at Celtic, because he didn't want to be, and all of that. So it's not that I'm trying to single him out. I think, again, the issues at Celtic at the moment go far beyond Hyunjin Yang. It's just another symptom of what we're seeing across the club and within the team at the moment. And yeah, so we are... There's lots of stuff here. I think we said at the start of the show, or the headline of the show, is 3 positives and 3 negatives. I think we've come up on more on each side, Ryan. I don't want to end this too negatively. I do want to just reinforce the point that a point away from home in the Europa League at this stage is very good. I think you do then need to back this up with 2 consecutive home victories that Celtic have got coming up. It's, you know, Braga's not going to be easy, and, you know, Brendan Rodgers saying he needs the support from the crowd of that. I don't think ticket sales have been especially good. There's no organised boycott. I think time will tell how engaged the support are with the Europa League by what kind of crowd we do see at Celtic Park next Thursday night. But that's a must-win game. You know, that's a must-win game if Celtic want to get, you know, high up this Europa League table and have a firm foot in whatever the next round is. Because there's 2 options, of course, whether you finish in the top 8 or below that. Whatever Celtic want to do in this competition, it really will rely on home form a lot of the time. Because I think we saw last night, like, Celtic will pick up points, but I think it's really hard to win a game away from home in Europe, even in Europa League. We know it's exceptionally difficult in the Champions League, but it's very hard in the Europa League as well. And so it all comes down to home form if Celtic really do have aspirations in this competition.
Yeah, the next 3 games are against Braga, Sturm Graz and Midfield.
Yeah.
They're all winnable games. And when Celtic are in good form, they're all winnable games for me, and they're ones that Celtic can certainly pick up points, but particularly those first 2, and you're right to mention them. Braga and Sturm Graz, I'd be wanting Celtic to try their hardest to get maximum points from those 2 games to really put themselves in a good position. If they can pick up points away from home, whether that be draws or maybe the odd win here or there, then absolutely brilliant. But as long as they're picking up points while consolidating a solid home form, then they should be okay in this competition. Other teams will take points off each other. We just need to watch and see how the table forms. There'll be more games tonight to watch to see how things go in that regard. But the fact is, Celtic have got a point in this competition already. It's a good starting point. Yes, Yes, they could have had 3 on the night, but they'll have to settle with the 1. But the good thing is they've got that first point, and that's something that they can build on. Hopefully next week they can get their first victory against Braga, and really, and 4 points from 2 games would be quite a good start in the Europa League, in my opinion. And then you'd be going into that Sturm Graz game thinking, right, how far can we go in the league phase? How high can we get? That's got to be the aim for Celtic in this. But I think there's a little bit more excitement than what there was before the match, because I think there was a lot of people that were invested in the game last night. And it just goes to show you, despite the unrest off the pitch, when Celtic are playing, you automatically go into that focus. You're like, you want Celtic to do well because they're playing European football here, and you want them to push on and do as well as they can. I'm just hoping that, people are well within their rights to do what they want with regard to going to that game against Braga, but I'm hoping that it's a good crowd and that Celtic can have a good night in Europe, a good early evening into the night in Europe.
Yeah, Seamus Gallagher reminding Hibs up first on Saturday. That's more important, John. Yeah, and listen, I mean, this is a Europa League show because it's the day after Europa League, but there's a, the Premiership is very important. And Hibs, I think they've slightly fallen away from their there's a lot of excitement and hype around them, just given some of their performances in Europe, etc. I'm not saying they'll be an easy opponent on Saturday at all, but again, it's another game you're expecting Celtic to take care of, hopefully fairly comfortably. But I do think there are challenges in that one as well. And we'll be talking a lot more about Hibs tomorrow, and as the week progresses, obviously, Ryan, you'll be there on Saturday as well. We'll have full coverage of that across the channel and the website. Full coverage of everything across the channel and the website, everyone. Thanks for joining us in the live chat today. It's been quite lively today. Lots of good talking points, good stuff coming up that we will take on board. And again, if you're checking out this, I know that a lot of you do check this out after it's been live. Leave your comments below and let us know what you're thinking of Celtic at the moment. If you disagree with anything we said, feel free to let us know, but let us know what you think of the direction of Celtic, specifically in the Europa League. I think just based on this video, I'm interested to hear what fans are feeling about the Europa League, because I think there was a certain amount of apathy in the build-up, and it's hard to get a sense of how fans are really feeling about the game. But in the aftermath of last night, let us know how you're feeling about the Europa League, whether you want to see Celtic really attack this competition now, or what your expectations are really after that. And I thought that was a good chat this morning, Ryan. Thanks for joining us. I know you talked about the game last night. Hopefully it wasn't too repetitive for yourself or for the audience, but we enjoy getting your viewpoints, so thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, guys, and thanks to everybody for joining us today. Really do appreciate it, especially as we were on so late last night. It's great to see some of the same faces on in this morning. They're consistent, and we love them for it. We really do appreciate it.
Yes. Again, we'll be back tomorrow with plenty more on the channel. There'll be lots going up on the website as well, so check out celticway.co.uk. If you fancy giving us a subscription on the website, it's only £1. You get 6 months access to our premium articles, which we really appreciate. It's a massive thing for us doing just the YouTube channel and everything, so consider throwing us £1 and helping us do what we do. Ryan, we'll see you again. Goodbye everyone, see you again next time on the Celtic Way.